Hello and welcome to the premiere episode of Beardcana, a hot, new, tasty Lorcana podcast coming at you live from all over the country. I'm reporting live from Los Angeles, California right now, and my co-host Jake, where you at today?
I'm in cozy Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Goes to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where you can usually find Jake living his best life. We're gonna do our premiere episode. Going to be a nice little set review of set six coming out. Azurite C. Does it have a fancy sub name?
Nope,
Jake?
just as I see.
Just Azurite C. Nothing too fancy here. We are gonna basically talk about a hand-picked 40-ish cards or so that we think are gonna, maybe be playable, impact the meta, slot into current decks, or build out new decks with 204 cards, I believe it is, plus enchantments. It would probably take a day and a half to get our thoughts out on every single card. So we're really just going to focus on cards we think are going to actually find their way into decks. And we're kicking it off with our yellow here, our good old Amber. And the first card that I'm hype on that Jake said he thinks is overrated is going to be Lilo Escape Artist. Inkable 2 drop, 1/2, quest for 2. It has the ability no place I'd rather be. At the start of your turn, if this card's in the discard, you may play her and she enters play exerted. Now I see this as a recurable threat that's like scary for me as a control player. That's how do you get rid of this long term? Why do you not see that, Jake?
I'm not super high on this card. I think it's good. It's the first true recursive threat in the game that I can think of. Maybe there's something else. But the reason I don't think it's super great is you're having to pay 2 to play a card exerted. And in the point of the game where that matters the most, like we're talking about in the late game here, your opponent, am very likely going to have a board that can answer a 1/2 at will. It's not going to be an issue for me to just bonk it and then quest and continue to develop my own game plan. While I do think it's a good sink for you just to continue to provide a threat, I just don't think the card itself is going to be that powerful. I think it's a little overrated.
Okay, I can see that. The way I see it is just, it's a decent enough 2 drop, an inkable 2 drop that quests for 2. Anything above a stat line is really bonus. If you want a 3/2 quest for 2 at 2, you have to go to an uninkable bonsai. So once you tack on a good ability, which is, a recursive play this again and again, I think it's hard to find a better card than this is a 1/2 that I can play, repeatedly. And in those scenarios that you're talking about where, okay, maybe it's not the best threat because she's entering play exerted and you're going to have the resources already to be taking that out. The way I view it is it's going to be a 2 lore that I'm going to be able to play every turn that's going to require your attention. Well, we're still both drawing a card every turn. So hopefully I'm playing Lilo at the start of turn, playing another 1 drop, and, you know, just flooding the board repeatedly and repeatedly. But that's
So
what
my
Lilo
big thing
does.
is yeah, my big thing with this card is to put a bow on my thoughts is we already have Wendy Darling from set 3, which is a 2 cost 1/3, which is marginally more difficult to answer. That does the same thing effectively. It quests for 2 and it's an aggressive threat. It doesn't have the recursive element, granted, but it sees little to no play. And I don't think the recursive aspect, most of the time, is enough to warrant adjusting existing Amber decks.
Got you. Do you see it in any shells that are going to actively be trying to get her into the discard and then profit that way? Maybe, Steel Song plays Whole New World. Do you see anything like that?
Yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, with the new Chippendale synergies that we'll be talking about in a little bit, definitely could be a thing that helps facilitate that archetype. And it could be very interesting going forward because of that.
Got you. Yeah, I agree. We'll see what she does. I'm excited to try it out for sure. All right, next card is going to be Tiana, a 3 drop that I think you're more excited about. So why don't you tell us about Tiana, restaurant owner?
Yeah, she has an ability, special reservation. Whenever a character of yours is challenged while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 strength this turn unless their player pays 3 ink. I think on curve, this is a really, really good card. If you're able to, being an Amber, you have access to a ton of bodyguards. Amber already wants to be playing with steel. It has cards like Chen Po that later in the game can help protect her on board. I don't like the argument of like, oh, it dies to brawl. Well, okay, show me something, not named Mim that's 3 or less. That's like a reasonable card that doesn't die to brawl. It's just the way the
Yeah.
game is. But the way that it taxes your opponent, sorry, is really meaningful at this point in the game. So if your opponent can't just like play Mim and eat her, they can't, use a Gaston or something without taking effectively their turn off to answer her, assuming you have nothing else in the way of protecting her, like the 2-cost Simba from set one or any other like cheap bodyguards.
Yeah.
I think she's a really interesting card that can help squeak out a lot of points in the really grindy matchups.
Yeah. I see it as, as a 3 cost, 1/4 unequal quest for 2. I see her as a really powerful tool in these aggro shells, and maybe even a singer shell like Still Song, where you're playing these vulnerable 1 and 2 drops that you want to be using early to quest and to sing, and you're going to get beat up by foxes or just, whatever characters your opponent play. A Tipo on 2 takes out a Lilo. I think having a 3 drop here that lets you just naturally play out your hand in quests and stop your opponent's ability to interact with you easily is huge. And then the fact that she's a great counter to 2 of the best cards against you, which are Madam Mim Fox and Maui, coming down to eat multiple characters. She makes that really hard to do.
Yep.
And I think just if she's able to get an extra quest out of a 1 drop, she's pretty much done her job. So I think she'll probably slot in, assuming they can afford the uninkable. I think she could easily take a slot of like a Baloo though.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
All right. Next up on yellow, we have Dale. I don't know if you had this in the list before I made my list, but I just thought at an inkable 3/4 quest for 2 is a great rate. He enters exerted unless you have a chip, which is pretty hard to do because none of the chips are cheaper and good. And so really this is most time going to be an inkable 3/4 for 3 enters exerted with 2 lore. I just think, that's a decent enough rate where we've seen Moana uninkable 3/4 quest for 2 with no abilities pop up here and there, and some red yellow Mufasa and some purple yellow Mufasa. So I think this is just a nice common, decent rate card.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this card, it definitely flew under my radar, and I was staring at it for probably 10 minutes yesterday, just looking at Dale here. And I was like, man, I think this is pretty good. Like, it's definitely overrated. It's not like a Madam Mim Fox, but it's definitely overrated. Quest for 2. If in the future there is a 2-cost chip or something, there's some synergy there, or in the late game, if you have a more expensive chip, it can facilitate him coming in ready. I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think just a comment to not throw away when you open your packs is why I've got this on here.
Yeah,
Next, we got
this
Dale,
is
which is
one I would definitely.
a 4-drop Dale, and this one's a little more interesting in what it's going to do. 4-drop, 3/4, inkable, quest for 1. It's got a funny ability, nuts about pranks. When you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck in your discard pile to give chosen character -3 strength until the start of your next turn. And I see this as, you mentioned earlier Lilo being one of the first recurable threats, this being one of the first ways to actually fuel a thing like Lilo or a thing like a 10-drop Chernobog that wants characters in your discard pile.
Yeah, it helps facilitate Chernobog, who costs 9 actually.
Oh, 9. Okay.
Uh, I think. Actually, am I
I
wrong?
think he's a
Maybe I'm
10
wrong.
cost 9/9, and I think people get it flipped. I
Oh
think
man,
people think
silly
he's a
me.
9 cost 10/10, but
Yeah, as soon as I said that, I was like, I think I'm wrong. But yeah, Dale I think is really good. It's actually like pretty awesome outside of the Chernobog effect. Like, okay, yeah, you lose whatever the 3 cards on the top of your deck were, but being able to just sap something of 3 strength means whatever it is that's exerted is probably getting banished on your opponent's side of the board, and I think that is awesome. it has a real meaningful impact in some of the matchups where Amber decks typically have some issues, like say against Ruby Sapphire, for example. This can go down, hit a Maui. Now the Maui's a 2x, assuming the Maui already traded into you. It's probably like a 2-3, maybe worse. And so you're easily able to get that with whatever you have left on your board.
Yeah.
I think this
Or
card's actually like pretty good.
on the opposite, it does what you said, and it allows you to trade. Give you that Merlin crab type effect, give you a profitable
Yeah.
trade. But it also does what these aggro and a lot of yellow decks want to do, which is protect. So you have that
Yep.
Maui situation. They play Maui, eat your guy. You can follow up with this Dale to shrink the Maui, and maybe quest with your three health guys for another turn. You know what I mean? So I think
Oh
this
yeah,
card is
absolutely.
very interesting, and I look forward to a time when you have four drops like this where you can build your deck around it. And I don't know if it's there yet, but this definitely piqued my interest to go, oh man, we can actually fuel out a Chernobog, with just one four drop. If your deck's mostly characters, it's not going to be that hard to drop a Chernobog on five. So I'll keep my
Yep.
eyes out for that. And then next we have the Shift, the Chip and Dale. 8 cost, 6/6 uninkable, quest for 3. It's a Floodborn hero. Shift 5, and you can shift it onto a Chip or a Dale. This card being counted as both a Chip and Dale card. And it has the search and rescue ability. During your turn, whenever a card's been in your inkwell, you can return a character from your discard to your hand. Pretty strong ability to get for free there, don't you think?
I think this card is really good. I think this card was looked at and pretty hyped up because it was one of the first cards that was actually spoiled for Azurite Seas. Just like its stats on rate as a shift, so on turn 5 you're able to play a 6/6 that quests for 3. Just that by itself is like really good. And then you add into the effect of being able to then follow up. Let's say you just shift him and then ink for turn. You're able to get the same effect as the 4 cost Hades from set 1, or what is it? The Underworld, the location where
Right, yeah.
you can quest. And I think you have to pay 2. Yeah, it's a very uh, good effect being able to recur, especially like high impact, high tempo cards that maybe they had to answer, like the Tiana we talked about earlier. Maybe your opponent is able to answer your Chernobog. You can play Chip and Dale, get him back, and now they got to do it again. And there are not a lot of ways to answer a 9/9.
Right. And this is a card I definitely see. I agree with you. It's just a super powerful ability to get for, essentially free every turn, assuming you're going to want to keep inking. The play pattern of, hold it until you're going to ink the same turn is super powerful. Essentially, you're committing a shift, which, sometimes can get you hit with a 2-for-1. But ink, you get one card back right away. And if that card's a Chip or Dale, and then, you're halfway back to establishing this big threat again. And if I'm
Yeah.
thinking about hitting a Mufasa, just this seems like one of the worst reveals that could happen. Hit the six
Oh yeah.
six that I got to deal with. If I don't, they're going to ink get Mufasa back, or. And this is a card that if you run 2 copies of your deck, you get into a long game situation where you have 2 of them. They're just getting each other back, and that's going to be
Yeah.
pretty tough to deal with. So we'll see how it goes. 8 cost uninkable does require you to be super powerful. So we'll see if any yellow deck can pull off one of these big drops finally. A cheaper shift we got here that people seem to be pretty excited about is a 5 cost uninkable Mufasa, 4/4 quest for 2. It's got shift for 3 and the ability to understand the balance. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready your other characters. I'm excited about this as another type of Kita or Pegasus shift option where it's essentially just trying to protect your characters for a turn. And I like that it's a second example of that in yellow to where maybe it's got enough to where they can actually lean into that and build around this, shifting in to protect my either singers and or questers early. But you're not high on it, Jake. Tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah. So this it's Simba, and the only Simba I can think of that I would consider playing right now is the 2 cost from set 1 Bodyguard Simba, the 2/3, which is
Cool.
great on curve. You can play him on 2, shift this on 3 if you want to, and you get to engage in the beat down, a 4/4 that can quest for 2. Um, would this card be broken if it readied itself, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. What if it costs 6, shift for 4, readies itself? Is it still broken?
Yeah. Yeah, I
I'm not.
think
I don't know.
protect your whole team and itself is too much. I think that's too much for one card.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right. I don't know. I think that the one-time effect is good, but I think the ways that you have to facilitate it being exerted, apart from just questing it, obviously, right? Like in
Yeah.
the end game, if you are able to shift him, you can quest, and then you get to do your thing. But if your opponent answers your board, which there are a myriad of ways that that exist in the game right now, be it Ruby Sapphire, Emerald Steel, you have to have a board. You have to be able to quest with him, and then it be meaningful enough that your opponent can't just dismantle it again. I
Yeah.
just think that in like actual play, this card is going to be a lot less impactful than what it sounds like. Where
Yeah.
I do like this card is in aggressive decks, which are already playing the 2-cost Simba. I think this squeezes in pretty easily. You do lose the bodyguard aspect of it, but you get to just ready your whole board if you can shift him. And usually the aggro decks are able to threaten enough lore that you can't answer them um, with your board in time for this to not be relevant. But outside of that case, I just don't think this card is going to be as impactful.
Yeah. I think you definitely have to be interested in two drop Simba bodyguard. If that's, if you're just trying to pull this off and that two drop is bad in your deck otherwise, I don't think this is going to be a good look. But if you are playing one drops you want to protect anyway, then I think you can look towards the shift line. And when you're talking there, it got me thinking this is kind of just like an Uber bodyguard for a turn because it protects the rest of your board like a bodyguard would, but it does it in a way where they're really going to have to take the whole turn off from your board. And so if that's something you're interested in, then I can see it. But yeah, otherwise I'm with you. I think it's just too mid to make a big impact. Otherwise, if you're trying to protect Lilo's Maleficence or uh, Merfolk's in green. All right, now we're on to purple. We got our first purple card. We got a Diablo, an inkable Diablo in Amethyst. 0/1 stat line, quest for 1, and the ability Fly, my pet. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. Now, this was not on my radar really, aside from hey, if green purple can actually find a way that it wants to play Diablo shift line, I would be more interested in this than a green Diablo sometimes. But I've already seen people playing it in decks as a kind of a version of a Chernobog's Followers or a Magic Broom at 1, where it's something you're going to quest with and then just get your card back out of. Where instead of questing and then having to use it, you just quest with this until they deal with it and get your card back.
Yeah,
What do you think about Diablo at 1, Jake?
I really like this card. I don't know if I like it instead of a broom or a followers. I definitely like it with them. Because the thing with broom is like late game you can just use it to instantly draw a card, whereas Diablo you can't. Where broom you can like truly just cycle it. And then followers is able to help contest the board against things like Flynn Rider. It can kind of check an opposing bonsai. It can pair well with crab to answer locations. There's a lot of cool synergies with followers that this just doesn't meet because of the math of being a 0/1. But I think this card is really good. It says draw a card, and it's easily
Right.
to facilitate it. And like you said, Sam, you just turn it sideways. Just every turn, you just turn this card sideways until your opponent answers it.
Yeah.
Playing these big like Sapphire decks, you get into board states where the TPO can oftentimes be like a huge factor in the end result of the game. How many times did your TPO or your Grandma Tala get to quest because your opponent just ignored it? And Diablo could easily facilitate that as well. Like they just ignore your little 0/1 and then it ends up gaining you 3 or 4 lore. Then they finally answer it with whatever, and you get to just recycle off of it. I think this card is really, really good.
Yeah. And then if you're a Merlin Crab deck, this is the best one to be trading into the other minions because you're going to get your card back still. Whereas with the Broom or the
Yeah,
Chernobog, you need to, use their cycling ability. So yeah, I think this is going to
yeah,
see play. I think green purple, even, again, that's a deck that loves to play Merlin Crabs oftentimes. And so, you know, maybe the deck goes away from any deck that's playing Cusco at 2 as a crab target. I'd much rather be interested in this Diablo for me. So
Yeah.
I think he's gonna slot in a lot of places.
Yeah, this card with like Lyle, where you get the extra synergy just at one, because Lyle's already great with followers and broom.
Right.
You have the same existing synergy with library. It's just an inkable one cost that you don't have to worry about. You like your opponent has less ways to stop you from drawing. You actually have no way to stop you from drawing,
Yeah.
other than I guess like return it to your hand. Because like if you play a broom and pass turn, your opponent can remove it and you don't get your draw, and we've all been there and it feels bad. This is just like I'm always going to get my card
Yeah, that's
unless you
true. There's like
undersea me or something.
upside and downside to each of their little abilities. You're right. Yeah, because like you said earlier, you can, if you draw the broom, you can cycle it right away, whereas this, you might have to sit on it. And that's one of the things I'm negative about is like letting your opponent have agency over your card draw is bad. So that's where I'm a
Yeah,
little down on this is that, I've played some games already where I'm playing Emerald Steel against this. I'm like, I'm just going to ignore this now until your hand's empty, and then I'm going to kill it and then make you discard that as to where
yeah,
Chernobog and Broom could be more active in trying to find answers. So, but let's move on.
yeah.
I think this is the first time we've seen this stat line. Definitely an inkable 3 cost 1/3 Magic Carpet Quest for 3.
Yeah,
Is this good enough to just get slammed into aggro right away?
well, I think like the easiest comparison for this card in aggro is Pinocchio, right?
Hmm.
Like that was what I saw this. I was like, okay, this is better than Pinocchio at two, and probably because that deck has such an issue with inkability. You have a ton of two drops. I think this fits well into three. Being a 1/3 doesn't matter much. Maybe it matters some, but not much. And then being able to quest for three. Actually, I take that back. I think the 1/3 might matter more because things like Tipo aren't going away. These little like 1x and 2x that can answer Pinocchio cleanly probably don't answer Carpet by themselves. So actually, the three willpower probably matters more than I'm giving it credit for. I think it's
Yeah,
pretty good. I
yeah,
don't know if it makes the cut in aggro, but if not, it's very close.
yeah. I think I agree with you. I think for me, the reason why I like this quite a bit in the aggro decks is I think they might have to get away from being so all in on one drops and actually just kind of beef up the curve. And so I like a thing like Magic Carpet for that, where I see the type of curve that would be scary to me is, turn 3 Magic Carpet, turn 4 quest with it, use a spin to ready it for another turn. It's like that. That's
Mhm.
a lot of lore. Just out of two inkable cards that work well with the rest of your deck anyway. And yeah, that deck
Yeah,
I feel it's always looking to replicate its like lower investment into inkables. Because yeah, it's like, well, we could play 40 uninkables and have the biggest lore bringers, but we need to pick our fight, and that's basically at the one drop slots because that's the best rate you're going to get.
yeah.
And so I think the further up the curve you get, where you have quality plays that are going to help you out, are going to be great. But here's another 3 drop. And now I wanted to switch over to this quickly because a lot of things we said about being included in aggro, this card might just take that slot anyway. We've got the White Rose, Jewel of the Garden, an inkable 3 drop 3/3 quest for 1. When you play this character, gain 1 lore. I think it easily slots into aggro. The bigger question, Jake, how do you see this slotting in to Amethyst decks as a whole, and like specifically Ruby Amethyst? Do you think this card is going to become a staple?
I don't think so, but I could totally be wrong. You'd have to ask Kendall on that one. I think this card is very good. Obviously, it's got a great rate. The obvious comparison is Merlin Goat, right? But Goat has the benefit of being a Merlin card, so having the leave trigger as well, which is massive. Because and hopefully most of the viewers will know that once you get to like 16, a goat is basically just game because it's going to be played, take you to 17. If you remove it, go to 18. Then they just are like one card away from ending the game on the spot. It is such a powerful bonus of having the leave trigger as well as synergistic with all the mem cards. Um, I think this card's very good. I don't know if it makes play in Ruby Amethyst. There's an Amethyst Steel deck that's very aggressive. I think it did top 16. Actually, maybe got top 8 at
I think
Seattle.
16 sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, did very well there. I think a card like this could certainly fit in alongside a goat, but I think a lot of the Amethyst decks right now, especially Ruby Amethyst, are super tight, and I just don't know
Mhm.
if this is good enough to break into there. Well, like we just talked about with Carpet in an aggro deck, I think this card is awesome with Goat. You just find room and put it in. Um, because those games often come down to just one or two lore, and this really
Right.
helps bridge that gap,
Yeah.
along with the next card we're going to talk about.
And to this, before we get too further down the line, it's an interesting dynamic where all the purple decks are their identity is truly like Merlin at 4, and it's like a
Yeah,
goat rabbit strategy, and now we're having this replicated at other, and we'll see some more later. Like, okay, now we can go like, oh, I'm goat heavy because I want to play the rose into goat, and then maybe all my bounces are going to be lore, and we're cutting rabbit and we're moving a certain direction, or we could go the other direction and instead of white rose goat get into rabbit, and this card we're going to talk about now, 4-drop uninkable genie, wish fulfilled, 2/4 quest for 2. He's got evasive and also the ability what comes next when you play this character, draw a card. So I think purple has a lot. Obviously they've been having goat rabbit, but now we have two new cards that are very similarly slotted, but they head us in a little bit different directions. With this, I think both these newer cards being more aggressive in that Rose comes down at 3, and then this genie you play it, and it's a evasive quester for 2, which is pretty aggressively statted in our current meta.
yeah, with evasive, like
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
yeah, with evasive, so it's very difficult to answer on board at a 2/4 in the current metagame, unless you're playing something like Pixie Dust to help give it evasive, or another card that does a similar effect like the Tinkerbells. A 2/4 with evasive, quest for 2, cost 4 is uninkable, but that's fine. Is very good. The obvious comparison is Merlin Rabbit. This will always draw you at least one less card than a Merlin Rabbit. If you get to like do the thing where you play rabbit, bounce rabbit, replay rabbit, then it gets to add up. Is one less card worth the trade off of another lore? Maybe. Definitely in more aggressive oriented decks. Because like I said, this isn't gonna go anywhere. It's a 2/4.
Right.
You can sit there and quest with it probably twice, unless they have Brawl. But like I said earlier, Brawl's gonna answer Rabbit just the same. But in that
Yeah.
case, Rabbit does replace itself. I don't know. I really like this card. I think it easily goes into existing aggro shells, like you were saying, Sam, where you just kind of up the curve a little bit to get into these grindier games so you don't just get blown out if your board gets cleared once.
Right. Yeah, he's the perfect, kind of curve topper, if you will. Kind of your more expensive threat, but he comes in and replaces himself, and so he gets you into late game situations where your last card's a genie, but you're not upset about that because he's going to set up your following turn. Late game, he's going to get you into gathering knowledges to finish off the game. Uh, Obviously, I don't think I have to talk too many people into a minion that draws a card when you play it. But with the slots currently being occupied by Merlin, Rabbit, and Goat, that's a super competitive slot that Genie is vying for. I think probably what's going to happen is there are going to be mixtures of where you'll actually see people start to play threes of these various 4-drops, and maybe has something like 10 total, because this Genie really is kind of right in the middle of Go and Rabbit as far as card advantage versus lore goes, in that he does both. Instead of, Rabbit does cards, Goat does lore. This guy does both. You play him down, quest for 2, pick him back up. Oh, well, I got an extra lore than a Rabbit would have, but I got one less card. It's like, well, I got
Right,
less lore than a Goat would have, but I got an extra card. And so I think it's
right,
really going to be, deck dependent. Which of these do I want? And then you'll see like 4 of that one, and then maybe 4 genie, and then maybe 2 rabbit if you're less card advantage, or 2 goat if you're less aggressive. I think maybe stuff like that, or if it's down to inkable slots, you know.
Yeah,
But I think this is a get four of these right away for me.
yeah, it's already in my card on TCG Player.
Excellent. Next up, we have another uninkable four drop for Amethyst. This time, Peter Pan Shadowcatcher is a 1/3 quest for one. He's got an ability, gotcha! During your turn, whenever a card is put in your inkwell, exert chosen opposing character. Now, I have this in here because I just think it's interesting for a repeatable, quote unquote, free exert ability. I think it's pretty powerful. We saw the green purple deck that top eight in Seattle with Beast Relentless had two Pinocchios at 2 and an Anna at 3 to exert opposing characters. And this to me is like is much stronger than both those if that's something you want to do. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think the Ana is a really good answer because it can get around Prince John.
Right.
This can't, which matters, especially in the existing set five metagame. We'll see how that develops into set six. Um, this card screams Blurple. Being able to do ramp stuff with Tipo, one jump, Fishbone Quill, any of that stuff with this could get really cool to be able to just exert down your opponent's board. Blurple's already a creature heavy um, deck, so then you can hopefully trade into them, get some meaningful presence back on the board if they start to get away from you. I think this card's pretty solid.
Yeah, I can see it. I see it fitting also green purple, Lyle Tiberius type of vibes where you want these drops that let you control the board long term. It's not just like a one turn play. You know what I mean? To where, okay, I'll let you gain lore early, but now I'm going to catch up with this Peter Pan. I'm going to, whatever characters you play after that, I'm going to be able to exert and challenge him. And so he can be kind of a closer, really, too. It's like, that's one of the tough things about Lorcana is you get in the late game, that 12 lore, threshold you talk about, people are just playing multiple one and two lore characters that eventually just get them up to the 20. This is something that can shut that down. So I think it's a nice option
Yeah.
to have in the game now. Now we got an inkable four drop, probably back in the aggro category again. We've got a four cost inkable 3/3 Yzma, conniving chemist. She quests for 2, and she's got a fill the power ability. Exert Yzma. If you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand, draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. This is one of the first cards that stood out to me as like, whoa, this card's super powerful. I think I want to slam this on turn 4 and aggro and be filling my hand up to 3 every single turn.
Yeah, just the text on the card, I think is very powerful. Like those are some good words put together. Um, being a four cost 3/3 that quests for 2 is also good. So it is able to meaningfully contribute to your game plan by questing for 2 if you don't meet the needs of having less than 3 cards, like for whatever reason that would be.
Yeah.
In aggro, I think this card's awesome. And synergy or index like Blurple, I think is very synergistic because you can play out your hand, you can accelerate with T-pose and doing all the ramp stuff, and then just fill it back up. Yeah, I think this card is very, very good. It's probably on the short list of like most powerful cards in the set for me.
Yeah. I think I have to agree because when you have cards like this that have such a powerful ability as draw 3 cards, essentially, in Magical Dreamland, which is I feel is not that hard to do. You can build yourself away. You've already talked about aggro, blurple. I didn't think about it that much, but you're right. If you're wanting to ink, if you set yourself up with maybe Bell or, Fish Bones where you're inking multiple times a turn, this card's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, for that to be on an inkable card that has good stats and lore for its cost is almost like the I'm not having to work that hard to include a draw 3 into my deck. You know what I mean? So I think this might be Rapunzel, maybe not Rapunzel good, but approaching that level for something
Yeah, this
that's
card is a must answer threat. Like the decks that this card is going to find itself into and the way that they're going to be built, when this hits the board, your opponent has to answer it, or you're going to start to run away with the game. Think about
Right.
this in like the Ruby Amethyst mirror matches. If you're
Right.
playing 4 of these in your deck and your opponent's not, good luck,
Good luck.
because you're going
Yeah.
to be able. Oh, you played it and you were able to untap with it, draw a card for turn. It's a Madam Mim Snake, ink it for turn, activate Yzma, draw 3 cards, and
Yeah.
you're just going to bury them in card advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
you
I
just
think
said,
this
snake. I
goes
didn't think
great.
about that either. Yeah. Just draw three. Oh, hey, there's a snake in here. We're
Yeah,
gonna protect our Yzma for another turn. Pick her up, put her back down. Yeah.
yeah.
Very
This
impressive. And then
card,
also, yeah,
awesome.
like a card that can just get you right back into the game against these discard decks. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
I have no hand. He's totally blown me out. Here's Yzma. Maybe you can catch him off a removal spell for a turn. Uh, and yeah, maybe hell, pair well with something like Pete. You know,
yeah,
where every time you find a Pete, you're going to protect the Yzma from removal spells from another turn. So yeah, I'm
yeah.
curious to see what shell will go around her the best. But let's see what we got up next. Talk to me about Rafiki, because you're the one that put this on the slide. I don't know anything about this 9-drop here.
Yeah, I mean, look, Sam, you and I both love Blurple. We're big fans. Shout out to Humble. Um,
Shout out to Humble.
yeah, 9 cost 6/6, quest for 4, mentor sorcerer, which I think are both pretty relevant keywords.
Okay.
Shift for 7, doesn't matter. During your turn, whenever a card is put in during Quell, you may draw a card. In Blurple, this thing is wild. You're able to facilitate getting to 9 super easily in that deck. Questing for 4 is very good. It helps close the door super quickly, and you're playing cards like Fishbone Quill, Tipo, some Sapphire cards I think we'll get to in a little bit, and can draw multiple cards a turn. I just think it's a really good option in Blurple, potentially at the top end. But the problem with that deck is you have so many great 7 plus, maybe even 6 plus cards you could play. It might be
Yeah.
hard to fit in a 9 cost uninkable, but
Yeah.
I think it's sweet. I think it's sweet
Yeah.
design. I think it's a really cool card to maybe consider when building your Blurple decks.
Yes. I will say Rafiki Ethereal Guide, definitely one of my favorite arts in the set. It's just silly, and that's always going to get to me. And once you mention again Blurple, and I start thinking about comparing this to the top end threats, this if your deck's built with fish bones and things like that, I think this does compare well enough to something like Mufasa. Like if this costs 8, I would be like, oh, I think I would want this more than Mufasa. At 9, it's tough. And if we can make any of these keywords, Floodborn, Mentor, Sorcerer work, obviously that's a bonus. But yeah, as a deck that doesn't mind continuously inking in order to play big threats, yeah, this is like huge problem to deal with. So yeah, if we're not shifting it ever, then it's going to be tough. But I can definitely see it being top end threat. Uh,
Yeah,
if you're able to build the deck to where it doesn't mind, you're going to get to the 9. You know what I mean? Could be
right.
something like a Chicha type of build. All right, now we're on to green. Uh, we're gonna start at the 1-drops down here. We got Fred, an inkable 1/1 for 1. Fred, mascot by day. How cool is that ability? Whenever this character is challenged, gain 2 lore. So 1/1 for 1, quest for 1. But when he's challenged, gain 2 lore. I saw this as just a decent 1-drop for any aggressively minded deck in that the numbers compare pretty well to something like a Lilo 1-drop, a Merfolk 1-drop, or Maleficent 1-drop, where, if you just count, oh, if I play this and never get to quest with it, well, obviously Fred's better. He's going to, maybe get challenged and I gain 2 lore. If I quest once and this gets challenged, oh, Fred's better. I gain 3 lore instead of 2. And then
Yeah,
it's a tie at questing twice, 4 lore, and then so you'd have to basically quest 3 times with a Lilo Maleficent to do better than Fred.
yeah.
So what do you think about Fred? Is he going to slot into these aggro decks?
I think you summed it up super well. There's a build of Emerald Amethyst that you and I are both big fans of that plays Curse Merfolk. And Curse Merfolk has the synergy of causing your opponent to discard a card and help disrupt their game plan because discard and Lorcana is incredibly powerful. But Fred being inkable is probably the single best piece um, of anything on this card. I think it's better than the ability. I think it's better than anything else. I think it's better than the movie Big Hero 6. Just being inkable is such a big deal because Curse Merfolk isn't, Lilo isn't, Maleficent isn't, and we've all been there where you get stuck with that one drop in your hand or you top deck at late game and you need to help bridge the turn into your 5 and 6 drops. And Fred
Yes.
helps you break out of those board states. And like you just said, Sam, on the math, it's just better most of the time. If you get to quest once, it's great. I don't think like any game where you're getting to quest, if you have the parity of getting to quest 3 times with Lilo or 3 times with Fred, if you got to do either of those, you're probably winning the game anyways. So I don't think it matters much. I think Fred is better most of the time. It's just going to be, do you play Fred with Amethyst or do you play it with Amber? Or even like with Steel. There are Emerald Steel aggressive decks that are
Yeah.
starting to pop up on Dreamborn.
Yeah.
It's
And
a really good card.
I think the to your point, you made the biggest point about it being inkable is the biggest plus to it. And I agree in the sense that you get an uninkable quality one drop, and you get to invest that uninkable slot farther up the curve. So it's going to make your deck stronger because you get to go, instead of 8 uninkable one drops, now I get to play Bonsai instead of a Flynn, or now I get to play whatever. I get to play Genie now at 4 because I freed up those uninkable slots. So it's
Yeah.
obviously worse
But
against direct removal spells,
yeah.
but again, to your point, in this, success case where Lilo's better, oh, I'm probably winning. In the case where my one drops, are all getting hit with removal, I'm probably losing. Means that you're not down as much on that side of it.
Yeah.
All right, now to something I'm looking for more of in Lorcana is some little efficient removal. We've got a 1 cost emerald action here, Mosquito Bite. Put 1 damage counter on chosen character. This is something that I think we've needed just from the perspective of if you want to punish turn 1 Lilos or turn 1 Chernobog, what do you do? And there's never been a great way to interact with that early. So at Inkable at least, of course, there's cannons fire and stuff like that. But I like this at green, and I don't know. It's going to see a lot of play now, but I like to have this effect here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think the verbiage is interesting. Put one
Hmm.
damage counter. Is that? I think that's new, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, I'm
Don't
not.
most
Yeah,
things like this
say
say
deal damage.
deal X damage? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. Apparently we're playing Pokemon now where we put damage counters. Yeah, and how much is how much damage is 1 damage counter? I don't know. That's probably
Yeah.
in the rulebook somewhere, but yeah, just a little pinger. There's a lot of emerald effects that have you interacting with damaged characters. So
Hmm.
if I don't know if any of them are good, I haven't looked, but this is obviously a great way to do what is it, Cheshire Cat, things like that.
Hmm.
And so we'll see if that probably not does anything, but it's a good tool to have.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, next we've got a 2 drop inkable Gazelle, Angel with Horns, 1/2 stat line, quest for 1. When you play this character, chosen character gains evasive until the start of your turn, until the start of your next turn, excuse me. So I like this again as a double-sided tool. You can use the evasive as a aggressive way to protect your characters that are questing, or as a removal aspect, give an evasive to a character you want to challenge with. And I like this as a tool to give you interaction with evasive at Inkable without actually committing, Peter Pans and things like this to your deck, so you can actually deal with opposing Diablo.
Yeah, I also love the rate that this is. So while niche, we've talked about aggro a lot this episode. There is the use case of, oh, my opponent has like a Simba as a bodyguard, play Gazelle on curve, give it evasive, and you can attack past it because since it has
Ooh.
evasive, only evasive things can challenge it. So you're able to very cheaply have that interaction. You could do that previously with Tinkerbell, but obviously Gazelle being a 2 drop is a lot more efficient, as well as all the use cases that you gave, Sam.
Yeah. Excellent. So yeah, I think I honestly like I a lot of these things are adding up to me as a uh Emerald Amber aggressive deck. Like I love this as a 2 drop to protect the Lilos and the Merfolks at one. Just a
Mhm.
2 drop that lets you get another use out of your 1 drop is excellent. And again, that it gives the aggressive deck a counter to Diablo without having to invest again, whatever counter that would be.
Yeah, you
Now
get
here's
another
something
quest out of your Daisy deck.
before the pod we were bobbling around as potentially the best card in the set is going to be this 2 cost inkable Go Go Tamago. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Go Go Tamago! Darting Dynamo. Choose 2 stat line, quest for 1. Evasive, and it has the Stop Whining Woman Up ability. When you play this character, you may pay 2 to gain lore equal to the damage on chosen opposing character. Uh, Jake, sell me on this card.
This card is the stones. Also, I just noticed on the art of this card and the graffiti on the background is the emerald ink symbol. That's pretty
Yeah, I
cool.
just saw that. Yeah, it's pretty dope.
Yeah, 2/2 for 2, quest for 1, evasive. Like that by itself is pretty good. Not competitive, but pretty good. Can help check Diablos, helps check Flynn if that still matters in the coming format. And the ability that you just read, Sam, is incredibly powerful. I know some people aren't super high on this in existing like Emerald Seal archetypes, but you and I both know Muses is a very good card.
Mhm.
And being able to ping something with Strength of a Raging Fire or let the Storm Rage on to get an extra two. Let's just say that it was at full health. You deal 2 damage to it. Play Go Go Tamago, gain your 2 lore, play another song, bounce Go Go Tamago back to hand, and you can keep replaying this. You're able to bridge the gap to winning the game very quickly. It's an incredibly powerful effect. We haven't seen anything quite like this. There is the whole Emerald Steel Damage Matters deck that's been around since like set 2, I think. But this might be the card that finally helps it be competitively viable. It's even good in like Emerald Amethyst, where you have access to a lot more ways to return this to your hand. You have
Uh-huh.
less access to the damage, obviously, but you can still just nickel and dime your way to closing out the game, I think.
Yeah. I think, when I first saw this card, I actually thought of the green purple first as that's a deck that's typically, is playing some version of Sir Hiss at 2, whether that be Sir Hiss or Pegasus at 1 as a, Diablo counter. And I think, as of now, this is easily the best Diablo counter in the sense that it's a playable card by itself. two
Yeah.
two evasive for 2, like, okay, that's not amazing, like you said, but for it to have a late game ability to where I'm happy to play this on 2 to fill my curve, or it's actually a huge threat late game, I think is that flexibility is something we don't get too often. And I think this is going to be, a nightmare for, a lot of people. You're playing uh, to the board, and you have a situation where you're going to play, a Maui and challenge into someone's board, and now you got to think about Go Go coming in and killing you basically.
Think
So,
about what you were just saying with the Emerald Amber aggro decks. And like you can just play this on 4 because you have to play to the board against aggro decks or they're just going to leave you behind. And you can just
exactly,
play this on 4 and gain another 2 or 3 lore, being like, pretty
yeah,
realistic, 2 or 3 lore on their Maui, their Go, whatever it is that they have. And that might just be enough to close out the game. Even if you
absolutely,
don't get
yeah,
to like get the replayability, you just get to stick it. It's evasive, so they're going to have a harder time of removing it without using an action of some kind.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
this card
this,
is super good.
yeah, yeah. Again, I mean, against any deck with high health characters, this has the ability to just absolutely wreck people. In both the decks we've talked about, they have the ability to load up damage on characters, be it, I'm going to strengthen the Raging Fire your Mufasa for 6, and then I'm going to go and gain 6. Like that's a game ender. Or,
Yeah,
a lot of time with green purple, one thing they can do is have damage sitting on the table through things like Elsa and Crab, and, send in a Crab to Mufasa, hit something else for big damage, drop Go Go for, there's just so much potential for this to end games, and that's super powerful for, a playable 2 drop.
yep.
Now we're up to just a little fun cycler that I think might see a little bit of play. A two cost song in green. It's inkable. Chosen. It's called Heffalumps and Woozles. Chosen opposing character can't quest during the next turn. Draw a card. I just see this as a good little cantrip if the deck wants to fill out for Ursulas or Muses or just need more songs to fill the gap and either slow opponents down or protect your board. I could see this card slotting into some more spell based decks that maybe are not in the meta now.
Yeah, it's super good with Earthly Deceiver of all. I love it with Muses. Great card.
Awesome. Short but sweet, we'll get on to Stitch. Little Trickster, inkable 2 cost Emerald, 1/3 stat line, quest for 1, and it has an ability where you can pay 1 ink to give him +1 strength this turn. Doesn't cause an exert or anything, so you can really pump as much as you want into that any turn. I like this as just like a decently statted 2 drop that can trade up into both high cost characters and locations. So I think this dude is just underrated on stat line, where he's something like a 1/4 Sisu at 3, where its advantage is just that it has such great sizing for its cost. What do you think? Do you see this
My
fitting in?
No, I don't like this card at all. The only thing I like about this card is the numbering, because 626, since that's the experiment Stitch was, which is great flavor.
Okay.
Because like you just compared it to Sisu, but besides the 4 health and questing for 2 and having a very impactful shift that Sisu can bridge to, you have to take off your turn to sink your ink into Stitch for him to get to the same strength threshold or remotely as Sisu. While yes, Sisu is contingent on your opponent having the cards in their hand, that's going to be much more likely than just like, okay, I'm going to spend my turn to make Stitch a. On turn 3, he would be a 4/3, but that was your
Yeah.
entire turn 3.
Mhm.
I'm just not crazy about that. It might be good at dealing with some of the new locations that we have, because you
Yeah.
have to really get the beat down on those quickly before they rack up too much advantage. But outside of that, I'm just not crazy about this card.
Yeah. And I think another thing I like for it is like you can, if you're playing against an aggressive deck or somebody that wants to be questing, you can put it down on 2 and it threatens a lot of different things without you actually having to do it. You know, you play this on 2, your opponent has a Flynn Rider. Okay, well, I'm not going to quest into that. He can just pay and kill it. Whereas you're like, oh, well, I'm actually just like want to play my 3 drop. So it's one of those that I feel like it has some skill to it as well. And so I see it that way and enjoy it as well. But, we'll see. There's a lot of competition at 2. Now we've got one that I think you selected this for the old PowerPoint here. So why don't you take me down old Bellwether Lane?
Yeah, I'll make it pretty quick because I think it's a pretty simple card to get your head around, for the listeners as well. During your turn, whenever a card is put in your inkwell, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. The obvious analog is Lyle or Jacques, right? Most likely Lyle. And what's really cool about this is it works super well in Sapphire Emerald decks, which you and I have been brewing up. I think it's really powerful in a turn where you can go ink for turn, activate Fishbone Quill, 2 things of theirs don't get to quest, and maybe you can trap them into having to trade into your stuff. I think it's
I
just a
like that.
really strong effect in a deck like that. And even outside of that, you can still get the same usage of a Lyle, just on another body.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't see it until you mentioned that. It's like one of the things that we've been struggling with Emerald Sapphire is not just being dead like the turn after you've hit your big drops. And that's because
Mhm.
it's hard with removal. The deck's not as great as trading on the board. It's really focused on itself, ramping its own resources. And so to have a 3 drop that can go, hey, I'm going to ramp, but at the same time, it's going to slow you down big time. I think that now that I wrap my head around that, I could see this. I want to try this
Yeah.
before a bell, because like a bell is something I'm really trying to invest in, but she needs help. So maybe Bellwether at 3 will help out the bell.
Yeah,
Hey,
I think this card is easy include in those decks.
all right. Now we've got probably one of the most powerful cards in the set, and one of the most interesting from a perspective of what can it do now. But every new set, I'm going to have to check back on this card. It's a 3
Yeah.
cost action, uninkable. You came back, ready chosen character. So in the meta now, just three things off the top of my head that would be crazy. I'm gonna ready my Mufasa, Pride of Ruler of Pride Rock, and quest for 4 and get 5 more ink back again. I'm gonna quest for 5 with my Tamatoa, do it again. Uh, do you see this actually slotting into anything now, or are you more like me, where you're just every new set you're gonna have to come back and see if you came back is ready to blow up the format?
Yes and yes, but let me ask you this, Sam. What color are Tamatoa and Mufasa both a part of?
Green or blue,
They are. They both go in
right?
that. And we just talked about Bellwether maybe giving some life to Emerald Sapphire. This card is, I think, the biggest reason to play that archetype over something like a Ruby Sapphire
Yeah,
because you get to do just wildly powerful things, especially with Mufasa.
yeah,
Being able to double quest with Mufasa is so strong. You're able
yeah.
to ramp out the turn that you have the Mufasa, you can quest, you get all the sync that was in there exerted. You can play, you came back. Yeah, I think this is probably the strongest card of this set. Spoilers for some discussion ahead. Um, I really am surprised they made this decision because any card that has the similar text to it has always specified can't quest.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's just it's really really good. I think this card is bound only by Ravensburger's design decisions in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the first time something's like broken in half and like untenable, it's probably going to be a you came back situation. Something
Yeah,
as simple as I'm going to play a Robin Hood sharpshooter, and the next turn I'm going to quest, and I hit 3 you came back out of that, and you died. It's like, oh, well, that's
yeah.
the thing you can do now. So, very interesting. Definitely, I'm going to pick 4 up and stow them in my binder, and every time I build a green deck, see if I can fit some in there. But we'll see if it breaks anything for now. Next, we've got another powerful Emerald card, Goofy, Expert Shipwright, coming in at 5 cost Inkable, 1/4, quest for 3 with Ward, and whenever he quests, chosen character gains Ward until the start of your next turn. This card scares me to death as just a huge threat himself and also protecting other big threats. Um, what do you think about Goofy Expert Shipwright?
Yeah, I mean, you said it great. He is able to protect your big Tamatoas, your Mufasas, your Maleficent dragons, your Rafikis from earlier. Whatever you're playing, your big dumb threats, he's able to protect because those big bodies are going to be much more difficult for your opponent to interact with on the board, and so they're going to be more reliant on cards like Let It Go or Maleficent Dragon, etc. 1/4 quest for 3 is kind of a wild stat line, especially with him having ward. So he's able to dodge the strength matters removal. Well, I guess all targeted removal really. Um, yeah, this card is really interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of another card I was like, wow, I can't believe, given their current design philosophy, that they pushed the envelope this far.
Right. Yeah, I agree. For something to be this scary of a threat, but also works so well with other powerful cards, that's something I'm very interested in. Uh, whether it's going to be protecting Mufasa, Ruler of Pride Rock, or Diablos, or anything like that. I can see this being a headache for a lot of decks. Up next, we've got probably the card I was most excited for when I first read it is a Basil Disguised Detective. It's going to be an inkable 6-drop 4/5 stat line. Quest for 2. It's a Floodborn in green. And luckily, no Bucky now, but you always got to remember that for PTSD reasons. He's just for 4, and he's got the ability to twist and turns. Whenever a card is put in your inkwell, you may pay 1 to have chosen opponent choose and discard a card. Yeah, as soon as I saw this, I had thoughts of, play Basil, sing friend like me with him on the next turn, pay 3, make your opponent discard their hand, draw 3 off my Prince John. I think all that might be a little pie in the sky, but for me, this just slots in right into Green Steel as this is just a long game ender. Like, there's no way you're beating this
Yeah,
card long term at all,
yeah,
especially with
yeah.
Prince
I
John's.
completely agree. Oh yeah, especially with Prince John, you have to whatever you draw, you really as the opponent, whatever you draw really needs to be inkable because you're not going to have a hand and you're going to have to toss it away if you can't play it out and doesn't have a meaningful impact, or else this and
Yeah,
Prince John are just going to start to run up the board.
yeah, and
Interesting
it takes
wording on
like
this card
one
too.
turn.
Yeah, really interesting wording to have chosen opponent choose and discard a card. I there may be some other cases where it says chosen opponent, but most cards I can think of say each opponent, which I
Hmm.
guess matters in multiplayer, but also it's interesting wording if we ever get something like for Magic players a ley line effect where you can give the opponent ward or something. If there's something that
Yes.
stops you from choosing an opponent,
Yeah, give
it would
yourself
stop
ward, I
this.
think would be probably the wording for that in Lorcana. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. I think uh you're I don't blame you for looking into it. It's probably just more of like, they're trying to push multiplayer. This card's just like a heck no for multiplayer. Like, no, you can't do
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
This is probably the best card in like a
yeah.
multiplayer format.
And this card is what excites me most about green blue of like get ramping out a threat early. Like this card excites me way more than anything else because you get it down early and then every turn it's on board is outrageously powerful. Essentially, one cost sudden chill every turn. If you have Prince John's, it's crazy. If you have Cheeches going, it's crazy. Bell, like I said, a
Yeah.
lot of these blue green decks we're working on. The goal is really to slam Basil and go from there. So I think he could be
Yeah.
a star of the set.
I really agree. I think this card is a lot better than a lot of people are giving it credit for. I think it has a very high tempo impact. Also, being able to shift for 4, same as Tinkerbell. Obviously, doesn't have the same tempo as Tinkerbell, but for the longevity of winning the game by denying your opponent the resources in their hand, very very powerful.
Yeah, potentially like the best card in the game at that. Like I have this
Yeah,
card, therefore you cannot go long with me. Right now, that's probably like Lucky Dime is like, I have an inevitability. You need to win before I do this.
yeah,
This guy just shuts that down so fast. All right. Next up, we got Jasmine, 6-drop inkable 5/5. Jasmine Royal Commodore. Quest for 2, shifts for 5. And she's got the ability Ruler of the Seas. When you play this character, if you use shift to player, return all other exerted characters to their player's hands. Huge, strong ability on an inkable shifter here. Um, I'm not sure where she slots in now, but I just envision a future where, we know this is in our opponent's deck and they have a cheap Jasmine in play to shift onto. It just makes every turn such a nightmare for how am I supposed to quest and challenge that I could see it
yeah.
being good in that way. Where do you see with her?
Same. I think this is a card that every new set will have to come back to and be like, okay, is it Jasmine time yet? Because
Yeah.
there is a 3 cost Jasmine in this set that I do think we'll see some play. We just cut it from the slide deck for the sake of time. It is a hero, it is a princess, which are both relevant types. Shifts for 5 is a fine rate for a 5/5 that quests for 2. Um, yeah, the text is incredibly powerful. It kind of reminds me of the Milo. I think it was the third set into the Inklands. Whenever he's banished, you I think you bounce all the opposing characters.
Mhm.
Um, Slightly different, but also different cost and having to shift instead of be banished. Yeah, this is a card that has a lot of potential in the future.
Agree. All right, and then we've got 7-cost uninkable action. One of the scariest cards people are looking at so far. Bend to my will. Each opponent discards all cards in their hand, and I love the flavored text. Jafar saying, "At last, this is where your luck runs out." Do you see this scene play? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay,
Will
okay,
it be good? I don't know, but
okay.
there's enough internet discourse on it that I think it will see some play. Someone's gonna make a video, probably a specie, going through a Emerald Sapphire deck with the 2 items that help facilitate this
Mhm.
being played cheaper
Iago,
in
people are
those
playing
shells.
Iago.
Yeah, yeah. It's really good when you do that. When you play this on, I think it's like turn 4. It's turn 4 or turn 5. I think it's
I
turn
think
4.
they can do
Well,
turn four, yeah, if they have a ramp on two and one of the four drops on
yeah.
three.
Yeah, if you do that, you probably win that game unless it's against aggro. Even if your opponent knows what's going on, like, oh, they're doing the thing, they're going to play Bend to My Will. How
Yeah.
quickly can you realistically empty your
Right.
hand for most decks? Some decks
Yeah.
can, but against like a Ruby Sapphire, unless they have like T-Pos and Fishbones ready to go, luck. Like
Yeah.
you're
Good
going to have
luck.
a hard time emptying those 6 and 7 cost cards unless you're also ramping. But even then, it probably comes down to play draw. It's
Yeah.
a very powerful effect. One thing I saw some discourse around this was in the late game in like an Emerald Steel deck, singing a whole new world and then just hard casting Bend to My Will. And
Mm.
I think that is another just like the game's over. I have I have 6 cards, you have none.
Yeah.
Unless you have lethal on the board, I think the game is over. But the
Yeah.
problem is you're
Okay.
including X copies of a 7 cost, an inkable
Yeah.
action that's not a song.
I think my I don't see it seeing play for the simple fact that I think green has the discard package that it has right now is like the best thing that it has going for itself. And
Yeah.
so I would rather be looking towards the, Prince John, Sudden Chill, Ursula, Basil before this. And in that shell, I don't think this card's good. But I
Yeah.
could see it where you're referring to, where like this could be the only discard, maybe, or a combo setup like you're talking about. Make you discard your hand. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's got Jafar on it, so maybe it's some Jafar. We're both going to draw a million cards, and I'm going to make you discard your hand shenanigans. But we'll have to
Worst
see.
art in the set, not close.
You think so? I like it. I dig it.
Really, I just don't like the
Yeah,
shadow of it. I don't know.
I like the
Not for me.
background it's painted over. It's kind of dope. All right, now
Okay.
we got we're into red
Fair.
now. Finally, we're into the ruby. We got 3 cost uninkable Minnie Mouse Pirate Lookout. She's a 3/2 quest for one, and she's got the land hoe ability. Once during your turn, whenever a card's put in your inkwell, you may return a location from your discard to your hand. I mean, that's super powerful. I think getting back a location is exciting, and it's, if you think about it, probably the weakest card type that they could have allowed you to have back. And so, from that perspective, it just shows you how powerful a repeatable free card advantage card is. What do you think this is going to slot into any red purple?
Ooh, I didn't think about it in Ruby Amethyst, but that's very interesting. My mind immediately went to Ruby Amber for the Wreck-It Ralph location.
Yeah.
That you banish the location, gain 3 lore, gain 3 cards. That's where my mind went to. I think it's really interesting that this costs 3. So, like Chip and Dale, we talked about earlier, obviously gets that characters, which are much more high tempo than a location, but it costs 8
Mhm.
instead of 3.
Right.
And being a pirate hero is incredibly relevant, especially with all the synergies in this set. I think this card is good. Don't know how it'll play out. We saw from a top 32 finish at DLC Seattle the location matters Amber deck. I think it was Amber Steel, right?
Amber Steel, yeah.
Like 20 with like 20 locations.
I think it was like 28,
Obviously
28.
different colors. Yeah, I mean most decks just can't answer that.
Right.
Like it's you have to dedicate everything you have every turn to just answering two while your opponent goes on to continue their game plan. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Not
I,
sure.
I, I see it with you with the, I think it's Sugar Rush Speedway.
Yeah,
It's 6 cost to move there, so you really need free ways to move there. But the reward gain 3 lore, draw 3 cards is huge. I just think right now the commitment's too heavy into uninkables like this Mickey. You need like the other Sugar Rush Speedway that's a 1 cost uninkable, and it's just kind of rough from that standpoint. But I think if that does come together, it'll be awesome. But yeah, I just see this as like, oh, a 2 drop that red purple plays like one of, and it's just amazing in all the mid range matchups. Like, oh, I just play this 3 drop, get a castle back or a library back, and like you also need to answer this right away, type of thing. And it's like also, well, if you answer my location on board and not the mini, I'm just going to get it back. So it puts a lot of pressure on that way as well. Next, we got a
yeah,
very interesting
I
one
agree.
again for the like action based decks. I think we're building up to again. I don't know if we're there yet. 3 cost inkable Tigger in the Crow's Nest, 0 4 stat line, quest for 1, evasive, and the Swashbuckles ability. I didn't read that till now. It's pretty funny. Whenever you play an action, this character gets +1 strength and +1 lore this turn. When I think about wanting to cast a card like Thievery, I feel like this is one of the reasons why you'd want to be doing that. Do you see any of this red action stuff gaining ground?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the the Emerald Ruby action deck that Speci pioneered is pretty good now, and I think there's a lot of cards like Tigger or Maui from this set that help it like bridge the gap competitive wise. This card, whenever I saw it, reminded me of Pete Bad Guy from set two, the 5 cost 3/4 with Ward quest for
Mhm.
2. Whenever you play an action this turn, get +2 strength. While this character has 7 strength or more, he gets +2 lore. That's what this reminded me of. I think there's some really cool synergies with Ursula Deceiver of All to like help him get there. I don't know if it's enough. Being evasive is really good. This is another one of those cards that we'll just have to wait and see. But I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a home in that deck.
Yeah. And then we talk about, I mentioned Robin Hood Sharpshooter earlier when we're talking about the You Came Back. Tigger and You
Mhm.
Came Back. That's a, match made in heaven where leaving out the text, you can't quest again, get this guy to 5, boom, boom, you're winning the game type of situation. So he's
Yeah.
definitely like a build around. He's not going to occupy the slots that a Sisu uh, does right now, just because unless maybe if the evasive, you just want to have that evasive 3, and you're maybe able to reliably cast an action or two. It could, but other than that, I think it's going to be more in these action based strategies. Now let's go on to another card. I think it slot in to different spots like our Mickey Mouse is a 3 cost inkable Vanellope von Schweetz Gutsy Go Getter. She's got a 2/3 stat line, quest for 1. Her ability, as ready as I'll ever be, says at the start of your turn, if this character's at a location, draw a card and gain a lore. So she's like having herself at a queen's castle, regardless of what locations is at. Do you see this slot anywhere, or do you think as essentially a 4 drop? There's maybe just too much competition for it.
This is a card when you included it, I was like, okay, what does this do? I don't know. I know that the race or subtype matters for some characters. Um, it's good in a locations matters obviously deck, but I don't know if it's good enough. Like if it makes the 60. This to
Yeah,
me kind of feels like either it's just there or it's like a 61st card. But maybe if I played it, I'd be like, oh no, this card is incredible.
yeah.
Like the
If Yeah, if there's a deck that can if there is a Sugar Speedway deck that's going to reliably like put this in a location on 3, that's pretty dang good.
yeah, yeah, effectively draw 4, gain 4.
Yeah,
I
and I
really
mean,
like
yeah, it's just
this
a.
with the Rapunzel's Tower, I think is what it's called. The
Mhm.
one where your character's there, you get the +3 willpower. I mean, a 2/6. That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, and a draw engine at that. Yeah, any card that is repeatable advantage, you're going to have to look at. And this might just be a little underrated. Like her stat line, like if she had one more stat anywhere, I think it's much
Mhm.
better. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
But we'll
Imagine this is
see.
a 2/3 that quests for 2.
Yeah, the card's insane.
Or actually, what if we just change instead of at the start of your turn, at the end of your turn?
Yeah,
Just at the end of your turn.
same. Yeah, same.
Yeah. If it
Same.
said at the end of your turn, I'd play 4 of it in any deck where I'm playing 6+ locations.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I see it. If red purple gets into a place where they're just playing 8 locations for library, for castle, it's like, maybe some of these make sense. Maybe the Mickey makes sense. Uh, and maybe that drives them towards a little more aggressive build, or we'll see. Now we've got Scar, which now we know is going to be our set championship playmat and promo foil card. Obviously, not this art, but we get to talk about the card itself anyway. It's an uninkable 5 cost, 4/2 stat line, excuse me, for willpower 2 health. Quest for 3, and it's got the Teeth and Ambitions ability, just like the song. When you play this character, deal 2 damage of a chosen character of yours to do 2 damage to another chosen character. I just love this into Mufasa style decks that are playing Rapunzel and Julieta. That deck wants to play max characters. He quests for 3. He can come down and get a 2-for-1, killing a Diablo, putting some damage on one of your things to heal and draw later. I just say I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the only show where he fits in, or the Ruby decks that have like self damage matters, which I don't think are competitively viable. I think
Yeah.
this card is really hard to evaluate. If it was inkable, I'd be all in on it. But it
Oh yeah.
being uninkable is just so bad. And even in like the Mufasa decks where I do think it's the best place, if they like be prepared your board and Mufasa flips this, you're pretty sad because it just kills
Yes.
itself. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's good in those decks. I just am not happy about it.
Yeah. I see it like even red purple or whatever. If you play, uh, I guess I'll frame it this way: it occupies a similar slot as Elsa at 5, where it's like I'm going to play this 5-drop and deal 2 to something. And so maybe if you're in a red deck where I have my Maui, but I need Elsa, I need a 5-drop to turn earlier to deal with something like Diablo. It could be
Mhm.
Scar, or even yeah, if there's a red deck where they can afford to move that inkable slot from 6 to 5, and maybe now I get to play Maui Shark at 6 or something else more powerful at 6. I could see that, but yeah, I think you're right. Is that he pretty much lives exclusively in a Mufasa deck, and probably not in any large numbers either. But I like it, and I'm excited for the promo art and playmat. I wish we had here to show our homies on the screen. Speaking of 6-drop Maui Shark, this is one of the cards that I'm definitely most excited about in the set. 6-cost Inkable Maui Half Shark, 7/5 stat line, Quest for 1, Evasive, and he's got 2 abilities. He's got the Choo ability. Whenever this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand. And the Wayfinding ability, whenever you play an action, gain a lore. To me,
Mhm.
I see this as a 6-drop that there's just so many games and scenarios where you play it on 6 and you just look at your opponent and you're like, if you don't deal with this, this is gonna be real bad for you. And he's tough to deal with. I just haven't found the shell
Yeah.
yet. What do you think about Maui Half Shark?
Sam, I remember exactly where I was standing when I saw this card and you and I started talking about it. This
Mm.
card to me is another one of the cards that like could be, I don't know if I'd say format defining, but definitely archetype defining. This card goes into the Emerald Ruby decks that, actions matter, obviously. It pairs super well with the Robin Hood from set 5, I think it's Sharpshooter,
Yep. Mhm.
with the Ursula Deceiver of All. Pairs incredibly well with both of them to help Nickel and Diamond gain the extra lore, as well as the Robin Hood can put an action, like let's say your Robin Hood gets a
Mm.
Pirate's Life and a Hypnotize. And you want both of those cards, but only one of those matters right now. Well, Maui can get the other one back for you.
Yeah.
It's super easy in Ruby to give him Rush to just like play him get a challenge. You have what is it, Vitalosphere? There's another one. There's a character that gives Rush. I just can't remember their name. Doesn't matter. Him being a 7/5 evasive is really, really sticky
Huge.
and
Yeah.
inkable. Like it's kind of crazy that this card is inkable because it almost
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it should be.
Agreed.
And I think that's what really like pushes it for me. It's a card that,
Yeah.
again, kind of like the Yzma we talked about, you have to answer this very quickly or things are going to get out of hand. If you can find room in a Ruby Sapphire deck for just like 2 copies of this, in the mirror matches, this card gets wild. You're able to get back your hideaway to help win the Lucky Dime battle. You can get another Be Prepared to answer the board again. Like this card does so much in those
Yeah.
game plays. Also, like all of your songs that you're ramping with in Ruby Sapphire.
Exactly. Yeah, all your song. I was trying to build essentially a blue red burn deck with Maui, and I'm just playing. Maui, Vision of the Future, or is it past? I don't remember. One drop, look at the top two. All the, there's a lot of actions you play that are just like, oh, a decent little one cost, two cost action where it's like, oh, I could see blue red now moving into a different direction away from Tama to a dime. It's like, I'm going to play a Maui and play a couple things. If you kill it, okay, that's fine. I'm just going to do it again later. And if you don't kill it, okay, well, you're just going to die now. Yeah, red
Jeremy,
green. We talked. Sorry to cut you off because you made
no,
me realize this when you talk about the Robin Hood sharpshooter dumping the cards into the discard pile. Robin Hood, you discard you have or you came back with that is a
yeah,
crazy. Okay, I'm going to
yeah,
challenge with Maui. Get the you came back. Use it on Maui. Challenge again. Get it back. Uh, do the Robin Hood. Like you could just go off in a turn
yeah.
from nothing. So I'm excited to play with this card. Probably most of all.
Imagine you untap with this and a Robin Hood. You quest with the Robin Hood, play you came back, Robin Hood does whatever, right? And then you play you came back on Robin Hood quest again. Use Maui to challenge in, get you came back, just do it again.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
really high impact turns. Jeremy on the Club Lorcana podcast was talking with Zan about this card and mentioned using cards like Develop Your Brain, Visions of the
Yeah. Develop.
Future
Yeah.
to just like, okay, my 6 drop and I'm gonna have 9 ink or whatever. Super easy to facilitate in that deck is gonna sit here and give me this incremental value. If I untap with this, I'm probably gaining like 3 to 4 lore off of him pretty easily in those decks. You can play things like how far will you go or how far I'll go, one
Mhm.
jump. All of those are gaining you a lore in addition to their normal effects.
Yeah. And all the stuff we've talked about, we have yet to mention a Be Prepared, a whole new
Yeah,
world. All these things. It's just like, oh,
yeah,
that's really good. And so,
yeah.
yeah,
Friends on the other side in Ruby Amethyst.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like
Or
just that. Then that's like base level. Like just play this guy on six and use another guy to sing friends is like that's already like pretty good.
yeah,
Yeah,
or
let's get to our next
Finders
slide
Keepers.
before we
Free.
finders keepers. Yeah, everything. Now we're finally on to blue, the old sapphire. We're gonna kick it off with one I'm not a believer in. I don't know if you are, but we definitely have to talk about it. Two cost inkable item called Microbots. It's got the limitless applications ability. You may have any number of cards named Microbots in your deck. So already a new cool creative thing we're seeing. It's got the inspired tech ability as well. When you play this item, chosen character gets -1 strength this turn for each item named Microbots in play. Now, there's a lot of applications of, oh, this is a cool item. You can play as many as you want. We're going to get through some of the slides here now. Do we have the big boy in here that we could just show him combo in with big yokai? A little
You okay?
scrolly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, he's not in here, but there's a big 10 cost, or yeah, 10 cost yokai. Is he 10 or 9?
I can't remember, but yeah,
We didn't
he
put
is
him
a
in here.
big
We've
boy.
messed up. Anyway, he allows you to play the microbots for free. And then when he quests, he allows you to draw cards equal to the number of characters your opponent has to play with 0 power. And so if you're able to get a lot of these
Yeah.
microbots together, uh, draw a bunch of cards, maybe Jafar, maybe you got something going on. I'm just not a believer in all this because it's just a bunch of air balls you got to put in your deck. But we have like some
Right.
combos up on screen that show you what is possible with it. Is there anything to you that sticks out about the microbots that can like actually be good?
Yeah, real quick, Yokai, because you're right. I didn't even think about him when I was throwing this together. He is a 9 cost inkable 6/10, which is just preposterously large. Quest for 2. He shifts for 6. You may play items named microbots for free. Whenever this character quests, draw a card for each opposing character with 0 strength,
Mhm.
like you said. Um, I think this card has some like really wild potential with cards like the gadget from this set, which we also didn't include, or the aerial from set one, where you're able to like very rapidly cantrip these
Mhm.
items, and you can just fly through your deck with Maurice, world famous inventor from set one. I think we have a combo on the
Yeah,
slide
we have it
after
up.
Microbot, and he he has a ability whenever you play an item, you may draw a card. This pairs super well with Yokai. So if you have enough of these in your deck, I don't know what the breaking point is for the math. You could potentially just win using
Yeah.
aerial, and there's cards. I think it's like Medal of Heroes from
Yeah,
set
Heroes
five,
Medallion,
where
I
you,
think.
yeah, that one where you pay two and you give a character an extra two lore that turn. So Ariel's questing for three every time, and it's super easy to just win the game on the spot.
Mhm. Yeah, I think,
It is a little,
I just think it's too many moving pieces right now. But I definitely agree that we kind of have what the core would look like. Like, I think Ariel, was it Who's It Collector? I think that would be a great start and something to aim for with, try to use the microbots to win the game and not just gain some advantage some other way.
yeah,
I
works
think
really
it'll
well
just
with
take more.
Tamatoa, obviously.
Something
Yeah,
like a something that would maybe return all your items to your hand could pitch something like that over the edge. Now we've
yeah.
got one of the more hype cards of the set. Why don't you tell us about Oswald Lucky Rabbit?
Oswald is a two-cost uninkable 2/1 storyborn hero with favorable chance. During your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an item card, you may play that item for free and enters play exerted. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. An Oswald Quest for 2. This card is, I think, the scariest card in the set. Kind of like we were talking about with You Came Back, this card really surprises me that Ravensburger did this from a design perspective, because we've seen similar effects, but it's never been, just blanket item or blanket card for free. It's usually like cost 5 or less, cost 3 or less, something like that. Um, I think it's an incredibly powerful card that will probably, or at least should, limit Ravensburger design going forward. There's a lot of items that I don't think they can really print with this. Like, imagine an item that just has a pay effect. You don't have to exert it, and it removes something. Kind of like a Bang crossbow, but it's just a character. It's not a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really scary with an Oswald. And also Quest for 2. Like a two-cost questing for 2, yes, it dies to everything, but Quest for 2, so you're able to help bridge those turns over where the lore matters. But just like play Oswald on turn 2, turn 3, ink, flip a lucky dime. I mean, that's really
Yeah,
scary.
that's obviously powerful. And maybe, maybe Oswald is a way that you could actually fit all the microbytes in your deck profitably to where now my inking actually has a mathematically decent chance of hitting something on board, and that also sets up the microbots to where you can actually get the use out of the big yokai later. I think for me, just
Yeah,
for now, it doesn't slot into any of the blue that we know it now. As I think something like a Chicha is like roughly, a 2 drop that's going to draw me a bunch of cards. Okay, cool. A lot of the lists are having a hard time fitting that now, and this you'd have to build the deck, I think, in a more specific way to take advantage of this. I think we're just not there yet, and I think it's literally like we need another sapphire item that costs 1 and draws you a card. Like we just
yeah.
need a little
I
more of that critical mass.
I agree. I don't think it's there just yet, but the potential for this card is very frightening.
Yeah, for sure. All right, who do we got up next? Whoops, skipper. Probably, this is probably gonna be my end of podcast list here. We've got a 2 cost action in Sapphire, Sail to Azurite Sea. It is inkable, and it says this turn you may put an additional card from your hand into your inkwell face down. Draw a card. So very similar to a 1 jump, a Tipo, a Fishbone. One of these ramp cards. It does have the Bell-esque text, and then it does have to be an inkable card. It's not allowing you to do something like a Fishbone and Tipo, which says put a card from your hand face down into your inkwell. This is instead just giving you the opportunity to ink an additional time in the turn. I just see this as a huge plus for any blue deck. Either you're going to be able to get away from the uninkable 1 jump, or you'll be able to get away from the TPO that hurts your hand size, or have more than likely a critical mass of whichever of those you want. And so you're going to have 8 of whatever ramp spell you want to have it to. And so I expect to see a lot more mid range ramp that's like, I'm just going to ramp on 2 and then play a 4 drop on turn 3 like every game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this card is I mean, I can't really say anything about it that hasn't been said. It's probably the best card in the set with using the parameter of best as the most played. It's going to
Yeah.
be in probably every Sapphire deck. Um, it's super good. It does everything. Being able to cantrip late game if you don't have anything else in hand, just a top deck where Tipo
Yeah.
and One Jump are super dead, is
Hmm.
really, really good. It does have the miss of not being a song like One Jump or not being able to put cards from your hand like Tipo. Like all of those things are little uh, ticks from this card. It's still going to be in every Sapphire deck. It's an incredible card.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of things people miss in the evaluation, but that I will just tack on right here to give you a few options of like this card's better than you think it is versus like Tipo and One Jump is that when you play this card, if you use it effectively, it's only costing you one that turn because your ink, the
Yeah.
additional ink it allows you to play, is going to be unexerted. And so
Yep.
you can do things like turn three, sail the Azurite Sea into a one jump, or sail the Azurite Sea into another one, into a one drop, or turn four, sail the Azurite Sea into a three drop. All these things that you cannot do with the TPO. And then that fact that you said it's one of your most important tools you're looking for in every opening hand, your two cost ramp, but it's also a cycle later. And that's amazing. That's like perfect for what these decks want. It fills both your roles without costing you an uninkable slot or a brick late game. It's perfect.
This card and the next two cards we're going to talk about kind of make me think that the leaked Hiram nerf from a few months ago might actually be a little more credible than like, oh, it was just a mistake. Because
Hmm.
currently, if you got rid of Hiram, Sapphire just doesn't exist because it needs it as a draw engine
Right.
so badly. And I think this card really helps make up for Hiram going to one card if that does happen.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Next we've got a location. This is our first location, huh?
Yep.
And Sapphire. All right. Two cost location Sapphire. It is inkable. It's got eight, what do you call it? Health on a location? I don't know. It's got eight health,
Willpower.
eight willpower. This location is very willful. It's a one cost to move to the location. It does not have any lore, and it has the planning session ability. At the start of your turn, if you have a character here, you may put the top card of your inkwell face down and exert it. I just see this as like long term advantage for any blue deck that's willing to slow down a little bit and just get the extra card every turn. Amazing. For me, the use case I want to do is play a Chicha on two, turn three, play this center there, and then every turn you're basically getting plus two cards. Um, I don't know if that's good enough though. More awesome blue cards have more tempo oriented blue cards have been spoiled throughout the set till now, but I still think it's going to be something interesting to look at long term. And then also like this is one of the ramp things that could get scary in multiples. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, Sam. I think this card is really good, but it's also difficult to evaluate because it is contingent on having a character there and doesn't gain you any lore. But it's inkable and it's really beefy at 8 willpower. I think this card is really good in a lot of Sapphire decks that we haven't really seen yet. And we've been talking
Mm-hmm.
about, what we'll call ink fall triggers, to borrow the term from Magic, where when ink is put into your inkwell. We've been talking about those all day. This
Mm-hmm.
card is another one that I think is maybe the most powerful at facilitating whatever your game plan is because it's just blanket ramping you. Very
Yeah, that's a
good.
good point.
It'll be really interesting to see where it lands because I'm sure it'll see play in some capacity, but probably not in the Sapphire decks that we know them today.
Yeah. And this card was the first indication I got that I think blue is kind of going to have this split of how it
Mm.
operates. Like the blue red that we know now that's fish bones and ramping into big spells and maybe a few bigger characters. Whereas maybe a more mid-range blue ramp that's doing stuff like Chicha, Bell, just high quality things that take advantage of ramp, where this, you make a one-time investment and get those triggers repeatedly. I didn't even think about using this with all the Inkwell triggers that we have in this set. And so that's, I'm going to go right after this and explore that with the Basil list and see the old trigger works. Now, here's a card I was initially excited for, but I think it's kind of fallen off for me as I've built more decks with set six. That's going to be a Tadashi Hamada, uninkable three cost 2/2. He's an inventor. I think the first inventor we talked about. He quests for two. He's got the ability someone has to help. During an opponent's turn, when this character is banished, you may put the top card of your deck in your inkwell face down, then put this card in your inkwell face down. So essentially double ramp out of one card. I just don't know how you build a deck in a way where you can afford to wait or let your opponent pick when that's going to happen.
I think this card is really good. Again, not probably not in existing Sapphire decks, maybe in Sapphire Steel, where you are a little more board oriented and you can just turn cards sideways, or in like a blurple style of deck where you are still doing like the goat game plan to just end the game. You're not so much like a lucky dime kind of deck. Questing for 2 at 3 is pretty good. Like the body's not awful. 3 costs 2 that quest for 2. Yeah, it's uninkable, but that's fine. It going into your inkwell and then effectively being a one jump ahead is pretty good. Like your opponent has to answer this card. In most Sapphire decks that I think this goes into, you're going to be interacting with your opponent's board or developing a wide enough board that if they don't start picking it apart, they're going to get left behind. I
Yeah,
think
you're right.
that's where this card fits in. I don't think this goes into Ruby Sapphire as we know it today, but I think like a Sapphire Steel or a Blurple, something like that, could be a really interesting home for this deck.
Yeah, maybe he gets slotted into some of these reckless, with these reckless cards we talked about.
Yeah,
Lyle,
yeah.
I don't remember what is in the set, the green card. Yeah,
Oh,
maybe that's a
Bellwether.
way to
Yeah,
do it too. Yeah, yeah. Set up
yeah.
a
2
little
triggers.
combination. Oh yeah, and it does the triggers then as well. Ooh, baby.
You can
Wow,
make
we're just
them with
comboing off.
Basil. You can make them discard 2 cards on their turn.
That's pretty insane. Okay, that's there. See, there's another one I didn't think about making them discard on their turn. Yeah, that's crazy, and that's insanely good. It's like you like go make you challenge my
Yeah,
Tadashi, uh, and I have a Prince John in play and a Diablo, and that's just like
yeah.
make you draw and discard your hand on your turn. Okay, yeah, that's worth a try. Now we've got Yokai, 4 cost equal 3/3 quest for 2. The enigmatic inventor has the time to upgrade ability. Whenever this character quests, you may return one of your items to hand to pay 2 less for the next item you play this turn. It's honestly like semi Hiram value-ish level of this 4 drop you're going to play and then get some card draw out of it later. Do you see this just as a microbots thing, or is picking up popsicles enough?
It works with microbots, works with popsicles, works with Fishbone Quill. Like, ramp this out, activate Fishbone Quill, quest with this, bounce Fishbone Quill, replay Fishbone Quill, ramp again. It lets you ramp into a dime on turn 4. Yeah, turn 4 you can ramp out a dime if you ramped on turn 2 and played this on 3. Um, Super interesting card. It's got like a pretty good body, 3/3 quest for 2, 4 cost, inkable. I like this card a lot. I think this card will see play again in these emerging Sapphire decks. This one might even see play in Ruby Sapphire
Mhm.
because you're able to get out a Lucky Dime so much quicker. You're able to utilize things like Fishbone Quill multiple times a turn potentially, or just cycle your popsicles.
Yeah, I mean, even again, a lot of these cards that have value have like a double edged sword, like in a positive way. I need a better analogy for that. Where like, okay, I'm going to quest with this, pick up my popsicle. Oh, that's sweet. And I'm going to discount my lucky dime. Like, oh, that's great. So I can see it. Yeah, I think again, another one of these blue cards that's like points more towards mid-rangey type of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. Baymax, one of the first spoilers I saw that I was like, man, this card's great. We got a 5 cost inkable 2/6 robot quest for 2. His ability to treatment is working. When you play this character and whenever he quests, you may remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character of yours. Gain 1 lore for each 1 damage removed this way. I just think he's a huge threat. That's just like, man, that's a lot of lore fast for inkable 5 cost.
Yeah, whenever you said this card, I was like, "What? There's got to be a different Baymax, not this one." Um, yeah, I don't think I valued this card appropriately. I think I just like looked at it and didn't really think about it. I think this card is pretty good, like you were saying. Helps keep your board healthy. Works in these mid-range Sapphire decks that are likely going to start popping up. Works really well with like damage matters. Yeah, I think this
Yeah.
card is pretty good. Also, like 6 willpower is just super beefy
Huge.
at
Big,
5.
big old booty. And like it makes it work itself good in multiples, right? Because okay, I play a Baymax, whatever, it's hard to deal with. Maybe he has some damage left over. I think this slots best into like Blurple,
Mm,
because those characters hold damage really well, like Elsa and Genie.
yeah,
I think is going to slot into Blurple at 4. Evasive characters holding the damage super well, and that deck wanting to be, I think it's going to lean towards being more aggressively closing the game, where because you're getting to turn 3 Queen's Castle, turn 4 Elsa, your thing. Next turn Baymax, heal my Elsa, move one in. It's like okay, that's we're not going as long. We're going strong faster. So
yeah.
we will
No,
see.
that's great. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, just a lot of value. Like, Rapunzel draws a lot of cards. This game's a lot of lore. And, like, doing it when you play and when you quest.
Yeah,
Pretty spicy. And next we're into steel. Thinking this is our last color we've got here.
it is.
All right, finally. We're at 2 drop, uninkable Calhoun Marine Sergeant. She is a 3/2. Quest for 1. She's got resist 1 and the ability to level up during your turn. Whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. I think this is going to allow steel aggressive decks to actually exist because it's a
Hmm.
2 drop you could play and not get immediately killed by Let the Storm Rage On. So, like, purple steel, I think, is the deck that wants this.
Yeah. Normally steel is the Swiss Army knife color where it can just kind of do everything. It has all the good removal. It interacts with items. I think all of the really good steel cards this set, maybe with the exception of one, are just super aggressively oriented, and Calhoun is no exception to that. Being a 3/2 with resist 1 is a really hard stat line to, I think, evaluate without like breaking out the calculator.
Mhm.
Being able to survive, let the storm rage on, you're likely surviving strength of a raging fire. So you're super sticky. You're able to interact with characters. You can probably heal her 1 if you need to with like a Rapunzel and an Amber Sapphire or an Amber Steel deck. Like you said with Steel Amethyst, I think being able to bounce and just reset her is really good. I don't think she replaces me, but I would think about it. I think she's a really good card that has a lot of synergies that align with her.
Yeah. Same again, like a purple steel thing. I love crabbing this lady, send her into some big stuff. Yeah, I just think, we're in a situation now where we need playable 1s and 2 drops into the face of a Cinderella singer, you know what I mean? And so I think this fills that role. And, it's a big punisher. Basically, you can't really quest into this unless you have the answer, you know what I mean? So you're not going to be winning that
No.
race of, I get to eat your character and we're gaining the same lore every turn. So we'll see. I
Yeah,
think
it's
this is
like
the type of card that will actually make like a purple steel like actually meta is when you give them these more powerful tools that are more specifically doing what they're trying to do.
it reminds me of the 5 cost Robin Hood Champion of Sherwood because it's the same effect, right? Like whenever it banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. And like that effect's really good because sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not going to quest here because I'm afraid they're going to shift in the Robin Hood and just eat it. Well, this comes down
Mhm.
on 2 instead of on 3 with a shift. Yeah, I really like this card.
And then also it has that like you're not scared to quest with her either. Okay,
Right,
you want to
right.
banish her? Okay, log into. All right. Moving on to Mr. Arrow, another 2 drop with resist. This time an inkable at 2. Mr. Arrow, Legacy's first mate, is a 1/2, quest for 2, resist 1. I just think excellent. Like, I feel like if it weren't for locations, it would just snap take Mr. Smee's place because it's just going to be better in most scenarios. And so for that, if you're a deck that can already heal or already deal with locations pretty well, I'm going to be looking at Mr. Arrow instead of Mr. Smee in those slots.
Yeah, I whenever this card was spoiled, I remember the discourse in the circles that I'm around. Everyone's like, "This card's really bad," and I think this is the most underrated card in the set.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, yeah, the 1 strength doesn't matter. It's the 2 lore that matters, and it has resist 1, so it's dodging everything. It's inkable, comes down super early, so it can be aggressive. Um, Yeah, I think this card is really, really good, and a lot of people are going to lose games because Mr. Arrow got to come into play and they couldn't answer it cleanly.
Yep, true. Yeah, I see it as this. Bonsai is a slot that people invest into. Because the stat line quest for two, and this is similar. This is harder to kill, so I'm liking
Yeah.
Mr. Arrow. I agree, underrated, hugely underrated. Now we're gonna get to Gantu. Tell me about this big dude. Why you got this big idiot in here?
This big idiot, Captain Crankyhead, is here really just because like it's such an interesting stat line.
That's his
Yes, it
actual
has
subtitle.
yeah, Captain Crankyhead.
Captain Craighead.
Um,
Okay.
he has weak willpower at 4-3, but that probably doesn't matter much unless your opponent's like investing multiple cards to interact with you. I guess like Smash or if they have a wide board strength, but now we're just talking about steel, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to interact with, and it quests for 4 at 5, which is just really wild. And I think comparing this card to like the Mirabelle from the previous
Mhm.
set,
Yeah.
like this card's actually playable. Like you can literally
Yeah.
play this card. It's the
Yes.
same cost. Yes, its body's a little weaker and one less lore, but again, playable and just quest for 4. And like these mid-range kind of Sapphire steel decks, or just mid-range to aggro steel decks, I think this is a great curve topper or something to include. Where it's like, okay, I play Gantu, and if I'm playing Sapphire, I lucky dime him, or like I play Gantu, and now I'm threatening just 4 next turn.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see
I
it in
think
that
that's
blue
kind of
steel
where he
type
goes.
of blue steel. So yeah, 5 cost inkable, 4/3, quest for 4. He's an alien, so if there is one alien synergy we didn't include because I just don't think it's there yet. But yeah, he is like he might just be perfectly sized to where like you're gonna play this on 5 and like get to quest with it every time and like
Yeah,
yeah, they can eat it with a Maui, but that's like only Maui, and then you still got a good value. So
yeah,
yeah, maybe he just raw stats enough that he could just slot in. And then
yeah.
like,
It's
slot him
super
in
hard
next
to
to a
remove.
Cogsworth, maybe.
Yeah, it's really hard to remove without actions and it not gaining 4 lore. Like
And
it's gonna get to quest unless you invest something that exerts it or whatever. Then you're using triggers on this instead of my other stuff, and that's fine.
yeah.
Also,
And
semi-relevant, maybe, is its captain, which works with Smee
mhm, mhm.
and some other cards that have like captain specific synergy. So that could come up.
So what you're telling me is turn 2 Smee, turn 3 just in time to Gantu.
Honestly, that would be really, really hard to deal with.
It would
Like
be.
I don't know what you do. Develop your board, I guess.
Now we got on to Wreck-It Ralph Ham Hands. I had not been reading these subtitles, they're hilarious. Wreck-It Ralph Ham Hands, 6 cost uninkable 4/4, quest for 3, and then whenever he quests, you may banish chosen item or location to gain 2 lore, and that's your items or your opponent's items. So I
Or
like this as
location.
both, yeah, location or item on either side of the
Yeah,
board. So
yeah,
if you need that extra 2 lore, you can sacrifice one of your own things, or he's an offensive tool to, you know, quest for 3, destroy your location. I can't think of a better Hercules type effect than that. And
yeah.
get 2 more lore out of it too.
This is like top 2 or top 3 cards in the set for me. I think it's
Hmm.
really, really, really good, especially whenever you're able to accelerate him with Sapphire or do something like you came back. Like that's just 10 lore. That was an easy 10 lore. And it's like, well, they have to have, items. I mean, you could have items, you could have locations. I think both of those are going to be more prevalent now than ever previously.
Yes.
Something like a Hidden Cove against existing Emerald Steel decks, just gone. That fixes the math for your other Steel answers to then take over. You're able to get rid of Lucky Dimes, so now they have to try to like Tamatoa loop it back. This card is incredibly powerful. If you ramp this out in item mirror matches and you're able to get rid of their Fishbone Quill and gain an extra 2 lore, stuff to come back from.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah. And yeah, the reading, yeah, most of the reading stuff doesn't won't let you quest again. But yeah, I mean, like, I could even see this being like the top end of like, we've seen a little bit of Amber Steel, aggro or mid range with less songs and more big characters. I could see that slotting into
Mhm.
there, or, Amber Steel Mufasa. Just like, yeah, I have good answers now to your stuff. And it's a big,
Yeah,
huge idiot that accomplishes my game plan of putting big, huge idiots into play.
Yeah.
All right, then we got John Silva. 8 cost, inkable, 6/6, stern captain. He's got all the keywords like all the John Silvers do. Floodborn, villain, alien, pirate, captain. Quest for 2, shift 5, resist 2, and the ability don't just sit there. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to each opposing ready character. I wasn't super high on this at first because I'm not super high on any of the smaller John Silvers that he can shift onto yet. But once I thought about how much work he would do in the Emerald Steel mirror, just shifting this onto Diablo, maybe that's where he lives. What do you think about John Silva?
Oh, I didn't even think about shifting him onto a morph.
Yeah,
That's
just in
pretty
the mirror,
interesting.
it just seems outrageous because it, makes you exert your Prince Johns, and having resist is super good.
Um, I haven't really thought about this card because I just looked at him and I was like, okay, this exists. A 6/6 with a resist 2 means you really need to invest a
Strength
lot
fit
to
for
remove
5.
them.
So you need an
Yeah,
Ursula strength for 5, which is a lot.
right. Yeah, it or like a let it go. You need some like pretty rare cards in this metagame. Cards that are like not seeing a lot of play or just not efficient, like a Maleficent Dragon, to remove this guy. Um, I don't know. I'm not crazy about the effect. Only 1 damage, and it's only to opposing characters. So it encourages your opponent to quest and challenge to
Yeah.
dodge the damage, or they can just deal with the damage. I don't know. It's an interesting card. I'll have to see it in play. My gut is it might not be good enough, but who knows? There is that Amber sealed deck that we were talking about with all the locations. It played the
Hmm.
John Silver that gets huge with locations. Maybe you just shift this onto him and just to have a really big dumb card that can help interact with your opponent's board.
Yeah. And then briefly earlier, we talked about some of these green strategies with the damaged character
Hmm.
ability. This is probably one of the best ways to turn that on. It's my turn. I'm going to damage anything ready. And, if it's not ready, then maybe I can challenge it and damage it that way. So he could be more of like
Yeah,
a engine type of thing in that way. All
totally.
right, that's the end of all the cards we're going to talk about. We had just a quick little sampling here. Whoops, it's gone. We had a sampling of an aggro deck. Let me actually escape here and show the two, three decks I have that I was most excited about, and I felt that I have tested these already and got a few games in and feel confident enough that it's like, okay, I'm going to go work on this some more. And this first one is going to be Blurple locations based deck. So it's got 12 locations, 4 library, 4 castle, 4 McDuck Manor, and then it's got 4 Tipo, 4 Sail to Azurite Sea at 2. So really, what you're trying to do is ramp out one of these locations on turn 3 most every game. And then if not, you have one of your selection of 4 drops that you're going to play on turn 3. So be it Genie or Scrooge to aggressively quest, Merlin again. So everything in here that you're going to play turn 3 is pretty aggressively slanted in the lore category. And then you're going to follow up protecting your locations and stuff with your Elsas and your Foxes and everything. And so we've played this a little bit already, and it has legs against a lot of things. It has struggle against green steel. We're going to work on that by trimming some more locations and getting some more early interaction going. But this has looked very promising so far. So there's Blurple,
Yeah, I
and
really like the way
then
this looks.
the easiest deck to build, I think, is the first one I built, which is to take a stock green steel deck and just trim the 2 Tinkerbells for the Basil. I mean, that's the slot that makes sense. And so if you're looking for an easy place to start, that's just where I would start. Just trim the 2 Tinkerbells for the Basils and give those a try. I think it'll be quite good. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is the type of shell where I think like a genie is going to fit in. Is I took the top 8 list from Seattle with Beast Relentless and your little Mystical Rose combo and everything, and just slotted in Genies and Go Go Tamago. Therefore, giving you more aggressive Questioner that draws cards. And again, these things hold damage well, super well for like Bell. And then the Go Go slotting right in for the Sir Hiss, giving you that evasive and Flynn counter, and giving you this late game huge like threat via snake, fox, and then you have this beast that's like sending in all the damage, bell that moves damage, mystical rose that moves damage, like so many ways to actually get the go-go turned on. So I think that's gonna wrap up our premiere episode, Jake. Uh Took way longer than we thought, but that's how card reviews always go, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of cards.
A lot of cards. Excited for set six, and I'm excited to see you all back next week for another episode of Beardcana, where we'll be talking about all the decks we've been working on and what we're excited with going forward. All right. Anything else, Jake?
No, no. Have a great day, Sam.
All right. You have a great one, Jake, and that's it for us at Beardcana. We'll see y'all next time.